The story of Islam in India is one of the most remarkable and complex chapters in the subcontinent's history. It stretches back over 13 centuries, more than 300 years, marked by a blend of trade, conquest, spiritual devotion, political governance, and deep cultural exchange. And like all great histories, it didn't begin with war or kings, but with journeys across the sea. In the 7th century, Arab traders, many of whom had been sailing to the Indian coast since before Islam even emerged, began arriving in what we know today as Kerala along the Malabar coast. These were peaceful interactions, built on commerce and mutual respect. The local rulers welcomed these traders, not just for their goods, but for the values they carried with them. And over time, as intermarriage and integration took place, the first Muslim communities in India were formed, not by force, but through relationships and trust. Towns like Kodungallur became early centers of Islamic life in the Indian subcontinent, where faith was not preached with swords, but shared through everyday living. However, in later centuries, the story took on another shape, one marked by conquest and political ambition. By the 11th century, the northwestern frontiers of India were facing waves of invasions from Central Asian powers. One of the most notable was Mahmud of Ghazni. Between 997 and 1030 CE, he launched a series of expeditions into India, not to spread religion, but largely to plunder wealth, especially from the temples of the region. Though his campaigns were intense, they did not establish lasting rule. That transformation came later, with Muhammad Ghori. In the late 12th century, Ghori laid the groundwork for sustained Islamic rule. His general, Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, would become the founder of the Delhi Sultanate in 1206, a powerful Islamic kingdom that would last for over 3 centuries. The Delhi Sultanate was ruled by a succession of dynasties: Mamluks, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Sayyids, and Lodis. These rulers brought with them administrative systems, Persian culture, architecture, and art. The Qutub Minar in Delhi stands today as a reminder of that era, echoing the sounds of the call to prayer from centuries past. But it wasn't just rulers who shaped the spiritual fabric of India during this time. Sufi saints walked a different path. With gentle words and compassionate actions, Sufi mystics like Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti in Ajmer and Nizamuddin Auliya in Delhi offered a spiritual version of Islam that resonated deeply with ordinary people, especially those who felt excluded by the caste hierarchies of the time. Their teachings, focused on love, humility, service, and unity, inspired countless people to embrace Islam not through compulsion, but through connection. In 1526, a new chapter began, this time with the rise of the Mughal Empire. Founded by Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, the Mughals ushered in an era of grandeur, sophistication, and empire-wide influence. Under emperors like Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb, the Mughal rule spread across much of the Indian subcontinent. Akbar, known for his tolerance and inclusivity, even created a new syncretic philosophy called Din-e-Ilahi, seeking common ground between faiths. The Mughals left behind more than political control. They gifted India with some of its most iconic architectural wonders: the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid. These were not just buildings. They were symbols of an era where art, science, faith, and power intersected. But time moved on. In 1857, the Great Rebellion shook British colonial rule, and with its suppression came the official end of the Mughal Empire. The British Crown took direct control of India, and with it came a new kind of division. Through their notorious divide and rule policy, the British increasingly widened the rift between Hindus and Muslims. It was during this time that Muslim reformers began to rise. Figures like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who founded the Aligarh movement, championed modern education for Muslims and urged integration into the changing world. Others, like the Deobandi and Barelvi movements, focused on reviving Islamic scholarship and defending religious identity in a colonial context. And then came 1947, independence from the British, but at a heavy price. The partition of India split the land into 2 new nations, India and Pakistan, and triggered one of the largest and most tragic migrations in history. Millions of Muslims moved to Pakistan, but millions more remained in India, their ancestral homeland. In the decades since, Muslims have continued to contribute to India's diverse social, political, and cultural life. Today, India is home to over 200 million Muslims, making it the 3rd largest Muslim population in the world. Islam in India is not just a religion, it's a lived experience. It flows through the verses of Urdu poetry, the domes of ancient mosques, the melodies of qawwali, and the rituals of daily prayer. It has been shaped by merchants, mystics, monarchs, and the millions of everyday men and women who, generation after generation, found meaning in its message. So how did Islam spread in India? It wasn't just one path, it was many. Through the sales of Arab traders, through the administrative systems of empires, through the healing hands of Sufi saints, through the grand minarets of kings, and through the reform movements of modern thinkers. It was carried by love and also challenged by power. And still today, it continues to evolve, rooted deeply in the soil of a nation where every belief has a place, and every story a voice. Today, Muslims form an integral part of India's demographic and cultural landscape. As of 2023, the Muslim population in India is estimated to be around 197 million people. That's roughly 14.2% of the country's total population. This makes India home to the third largest Muslim population in the world, surpassed only by Indonesia and Pakistan. It's a fact that surprises many, especially considering that India is constitutionally a secular state with a Hindu majority. Yet Islam is deeply embedded in the country's social fabric, and its followers are present in nearly every corner of the nation. Now, when we look at the internal composition of India's Muslim community, we find even more layers of diversity. A large majority of Indian Muslims identify as Sunni. In general estimates, 85% to 90% of Indian Muslims fall under the Sunni tradition. The Shia minority makes up approximately 10% to 13%, and though smaller in number, Shias in India have a rich historical and cultural presence, particularly in states like Uttar Pradesh, where the city of Lucknow is famous for its Shia heritage. However, a 2021 Pew Research Center survey offers an even more nuanced picture. According to their findings, 55% of Indian Muslims identified themselves as Sunni, while only 6% said that they were Shia. Interestingly, 14% of respondents said they didn't affiliate with any sect, and a substantial 22% were unsure of their sectarian identity altogether. This tells us something important. Sectarian labels, while significant in a scholarly or historical sense, might not always reflect the everyday spiritual identity of many Muslims in India. For some, faith is more personal than political or institutional. Geographically, the Muslim population is not evenly spread across India. There are specific states where the concentration is much higher. Uttar Pradesh, for example, is home to approximately 38 million Muslims, making it the state with the largest Muslim population in the country. West Bengal follows with around 24 million, and then Bihar, where about 17 million Muslims reside. In Maharashtra, the figure is approximately 13 million, and Assam, in India's northeast, has over 10 million Muslims. In some regions, Muslims even form the majority. The Union Territory of Lakshadweep, a chain of islands in the Arabian Sea, has a Muslim population of 96.6%. Meanwhile, in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, Muslims make up around 68.3% of the population. These regions highlight not only the demographic weight of the community, but also its historical and cultural depth across India. Looking ahead, the Muslim population in India is projected to grow steadily. By the year 2050, demographic studies suggest that Muslims will make up 18% of India's total population, which could translate to around 311 million people. This growth is largely due to factors like higher fertility rates and a younger median age within the community. But it's important to understand this is not just about numbers. It's about the continued role of Muslims in shaping the future of India, in education, in the economy, in the arts, and in civil society. Whether in the narrow lanes of Old Delhi echoing with the call to prayer, the vibrant neighborhoods of Hyderabad, or the quiet villages of Assam and Kerala, the story of India's Muslims is not just about faith, it's about resilience, identity, community, and a deeply rooted connection to the soil of this land. They are not outsiders, they are participants in India's ongoing story. The daily life of Muslims in India is as rich and varied as the country itself. Spread across diverse regions, languages, and communities, Muslims live lives woven from threads of tradition, faith, work, and culture. And while religion forms a unifying foundation, the way Islam is practiced and lived day to day in India reflects an incredible range of regional influences and social settings. Religiously, most Muslims in India observe the foundational practices of Islam as part of their daily rhythm. The 5 daily prayers, or salah, anchor their day, from the quiet moments before sunrise to the calm of nightfall. These prayers are performed either at home or in local mosques, often surrounded by friends and neighbors. Reciting or listening to verses from the Quran is also a part of everyday spiritual practice, a source of comfort and guidance for many. During the holy month of Ramadan, life transforms. From dawn until sunset, Muslims fast, refraining from food and drink as an act of devotion. But the evenings come alive with community spirit. Families and neighbors gather for iftar, the meal to break the fast, often starting with dates and ending with laughter. And every Friday for the Jumu'ah prayer, mosques fill with worshipers, listening to sermons that blend moral reflection with guidance on social and spiritual matters. But Islam in India is not just practiced, it is lived. Muslims in India work across nearly every sector of society. In cities, many run or are employed in small and medium businesses, from textile production and leather goods to street food stalls, catering services, and transportation. Others are skilled in tailoring, carpentry, or handicrafts, passing down traditions honed over generations. And in recent years, more and more Muslim professionals are entering fields like IT, journalism, healthcare, and education, carving new spaces and challenging old stereotypes. In rural areas, life often revolves around the land. Many are farmers, agricultural workers, or traders in livestock. Artisan skills like pottery, embroidery, and weaving remain vital sources of livelihood. Certain professions still reflect traditional caste identities. For example, the Ansaris of Uttar Pradesh are renowned weavers. The Qureshis are traditionally associated with meat processing, and Sayyids or Sheikhs are respected for their roles as religious scholars and leaders. Culturally, Indian Muslims have given the country some of its most celebrated foods and festivals: biryani, kebabs, halim, nihari, samosas, shirmal, and seviyan. These aren't just meals, they are cultural icons, each with a regional twist. Festivals like Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha are moments of joy and community, with prayers in open grounds, delicious food, new clothes, and acts of charity. In everyday life, men might wear kurta pajamas or skull caps, while women choose between hijab, burqa, or salwar kameez, depending on their region, comfort, and family customs. Education plays a major role in the lives of Indian Muslims. Many families still send their children to madrasas, religious schools where students learn Arabic and Islamic studies. At the same time, a growing number of Muslims are attending government and private secular schools, pursuing careers in science, law, politics, and the arts. Muslim youth are active on social media, engaged in sports, community activism, and even political organizing, representing a generation eager to redefine their future. So, where do Muslims live in India? The answer: everywhere. But some regions have larger populations and more concentrated communities. Uttar Pradesh has the largest number of Muslims, about 38 million, followed by West Bengal with 24 million, Bihar with 17 million, and Maharashtra with around 13 million. Assam is notable for its large Muslim minority, and Kerala, with its long history of coastal Islam, is home to around 9 million Muslims. In Jammu and Kashmir, Muslims form 68% of the population, and in the island territory of Lakshadweep, that number rises to a striking 96.6%. Major cities like Hyderabad, Lucknow, Srinagar, Mumbai, Aligarh, Bhopal, and Kozhikode have vibrant Muslim communities. These cities are often hubs of cultural identity, where old traditions meet new aspirations. From the bustling markets of Hyderabad's Charminar to the tranquil mosques of Kerala, from the academic institutions of Aligarh to the political energy in Srinagar, the Muslim experience in India is anything but uniform. It's layered, dynamic, and evolving. In short, the life of Muslims in India is shaped by faith, but also by education, by work, by cuisine, by festival, by struggle, and by hope. While challenges remain, especially around economic disparity and access to opportunity, the community continues to grow, contribute, and thrive as an inseparable part of the Indian mosaic. Understanding the problems faced by Muslims in India isn't as simple as pointing to one event or one system. It requires us to look deeply into history, into economics, into politics, and into everyday life. The Indian Constitution guarantees religious freedom and equality to all citizens. But the lived experience of many Muslims tells a more complicated story. A story shaped by systemic challenges that affect their safety, their education, their representation, and their future. Let's start with the basics. Socioeconomic inequality. A landmark government report, the Sachar Committee Report of 2006, revealed just how deeply entrenched this inequality is. It found that Muslims are disproportionately concentrated in the informal sector, working as street vendors, daily wage laborers, rickshaw drivers, or small shop owners. Meanwhile, they are underrepresented in government jobs, formal employment, and corporate leadership. The result? A lack of economic mobility and long-term security. In many Muslim-majority neighborhoods, people struggle with limited access to clean water, sanitation, healthcare, and even the most basic educational infrastructure. That leads us to the education gap. Dropout rates among Muslim children, especially girls, are significantly higher than the national average. While many children attend madrasas for religious education, not all these schools offer modern subjects like science, mathematics, or English. This means that career opportunities in the wider economy remain limited. Even when Muslims do attend public schools, they often face bias in underfunded facilities, leaving them to fight an uphill battle in the job market. Then there's the issue of housing and segregation. In many cities, Muslims find it difficult to rent or buy homes in certain neighborhoods, not because of affordability, but because of discrimination. This often pushes communities into densely packed, underdeveloped enclaves, sometimes referred to as ghettos. Places like Yuhapura in Ahmedabad, Selampur in Delhi, and Mumbai near Mumbai, Yeshinai are examples. These neighborhoods are frequently neglected in urban development plans, which leads to poor roads, limited schools, and a lack of essential services. And so isolation becomes not just social, but also structural. Religious discrimination and communal violence cast a long, painful shadow. Events like the Gujarat riots in 2002 and the Delhi riots in 2020 left entire communities shattered. Homes burned, lives lost, families displaced. But what happens after the headlines fade? Many survivors face slow justice, delayed compensation, and deep emotional trauma. Even in quieter times, a more subtle form of prejudice lingers. Muslims are sometimes portrayed in media and public discourse as the other, stereotyped, mislabeled, or unjustly linked with extremism. Words like anti-national or Pakistani sympathizer get thrown around far too easily, and the damage they cause runs deep. In politics, Muslims are visible, but rarely powerful. Despite making up 14.2% of India's population, they hold only around 4 to 5% of parliamentary seats. In some states, gerrymandering, the manipulation of electoral boundaries, has made it even harder for Muslim-majority areas to influence political outcomes. Policies like the National Register of Citizens, NRC, in Assam, have raised fears of statelessness, disproportionately affecting Muslim communities who struggle with documentation. And within the Muslim community itself, women face a double burden, dealing with both patriarchal restrictions and external discrimination. Many Muslim women still contend with low literacy rates, limited job opportunities, and social pressures that discourage independence. The triple talaq debate brought gender issues into the spotlight, but it also exposed how political narratives can sometimes overshadow the genuine need for reforms led by the community itself. In the digital age, a new threat has emerged: online hate and misinformation. On social media platforms, Muslims have been targets of fake news, especially during times of crisis. We saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic, when misleading videos falsely accused Muslims of spreading the virus. Conspiracy theories like love jihad spread unchecked, fueling real-world hostility and mistrust. The impact? Increased polarization in a social environment where Muslims are often seen with suspicion before they're seen as fellow citizens. Another issue, though often less talked about, is exclusion from government welfare schemes. Many Muslims lack official documentation like Aadhaar cards or land records. Without these, they're cut off from benefits like housing support, scholarships, health insurance, and business grants. Even when programs exist, a lack of awareness or bureaucratic red tape often stands in the way. Yet, despite these challenges, there is hope. NGOs, civil society groups, and educators across the country are working to close the gap. Initiatives like the PM Jan Vikas Karyakram aim to support minority development, although implementation varies by region. Meanwhile, a new generation of Muslim entrepreneurs, students, activists, and professionals is rising, redefining what it means to be Muslim and Indian in the 21st century. They are not just responding to challenges, they are shaping the future. So when we talk about the problems facing Muslims in India, we're not just listing statistics. We're telling human stories, stories of resilience, struggle, frustration, and progress. And we must remember, behind every issue, there's an opportunity to build a more inclusive, equal, and just India, where every citizen, regardless of faith, has the chance to live with dignity, to dream freely, and to thrive. If you found this video informative and believe in the importance of understanding diverse communities, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring forward more stories that matter. Join the conversation in the comments below. What did you learn, and what would you like to explore next? Let's keep learning together.